Today I'm going to show you how to do a basic suspension setup on an S1000RR. Jeff from Long Beach BMW Motorcycles. Today I'm going to show you how to do a basic suspension setup on an S1000RR. This bike has the electronic suspension, otherwise known as DDC. So what I'm going to give you is a basic track day / canyon setup on the bike using Race Pro 1 as a setting. So what we're going to do is power the bike up and then go into the configuration settings. For Race Pro 1, and we're going to configure the suspension. So on the front suspension, unless you have a separator, you only control both compression and rebound in one setting. So we're going to set the forks at 8 compression. And again, this is controlling both compression and rebound in one adjustment. And then when you get to the shock, it does separate the compression and the rebound. And on the shock, we're going to set the shock on the shock, we're at 8 on compression. And we're at 6 on rebound.
And why is that?
That's what I found to be kind of the nice middle of the road. Most guys, depending on size, if you're at the extreme small end of the scale, it might be a little bit harsh. If you're at the larger end of the scale, you're going to be on the softer side on those settings. But for almost everybody, that's going to be kind of the middle of the road, a good starting point, and we can adjust from there up and down as needed.
So the higher the number is stiffer, or is it more softer?
The stiffer, the higher the number, the stiffer, or the slower the suspension action is going to be.
So can you explain what's the rebound and the compression that you were adjusting right there for the rear?
Of course. So compression is how quickly the compression of the suspension is. So the higher the number, the slower it compresses. And on rebound, the higher the number, the slower it rebounds back to its original state. So the higher the number on the compression, the slower it compresses. The lower the number on the rebound, the quicker it comes back to place. So, you know, the more action you want compressing and rebounding, you control that by the number that you set it at, compressing and rebounding.
If somebody wants max stiffness, what would be the number for that?
I believe these go to 12. Let's take a look. 14.
So the person would basically put the rear compression to 14 and the rear rebound to somewhere in the middle, because you still want to rebound back to
you would probably, if you went that high on compression, we would probably then need to talk about spring rates. There would be an issue. We would need to talk about springs at that point.
The reason asking for the heavier rider is because, you know, we're trying to include everybody in racing. So I assume if you're a heavier rider, you need more stiffer springs so you could have a better feeling on the bike.
Correct. You're gonna need, you know, a size, and that's one of the things that we did early on with me with my race bike was we went up on spring rates because, again, you know, I'm a little guy.
Right.
We definitely went a lot heavier on spring rates, and we controlled those springs with the electronics in the dash. The valving is controlled electronically in the dash, but you still, if you're going that much on the compression and the rebound, then you need to adjust the spring rates a little bit. That's too much valving for the springs. The spring needs to do most of the work. The valving needs to just kind of help control it a little bit. The spring, think of it as the spring doing the work, and the valving just asking the spring to do it in a little bit more refined manner.
Okay. And why we can't control the front is different settings, and it's in one combination compared to the rear that has two different settings.
I'm not sure why BMW didn't give us full control of that, but there is a device that we can install on the bike. It's a 2D potentiometer that we can install. It's about a $600 item. It installs on the front fork, plug it into the harness, and then that opens up a channel that allows us to separately adjust compression and rebound in the dash, just like we're doing right now, and closes the loop where we can plug in and actually read data on the bike, which was, again, another thing that we did. Steve Weir from BMW was using me as kind of a guinea pig to try stuff and pull data on a stock motorcycle to be able to see where we were at with the stock suspension, just aftermarket springs, heavier spring rates for me on the track. And we learned a lot about the stock motorcycles playing with that stuff on my race bike. So it was really an eye-opening experience. Different tracks, mostly Chuckwalla, but we did a few different tracks: Podium Club, Button Willow, Las Vegas Motor Speedway, Utah Motorsports Park. We had a lot of learning.
We will say good weight around majority for heavier riders on the is the 8 number that we just said is a good standard to just start it out. And if they're gonna go, let's say, heavier at 240 250 with gear, they need to go stiffer.
So yeah, the numbers that we're setting in here, it doesn't matter if you're 150 pounds or 250 pounds. Those numbers we're going to start off with everybody. Okay, what we're about to do with the springs, once we get this set, we're gonna change that based on your size. So now that we have the electronic portion of it set for the suspension, what we're gonna now do is we're gonna set the preload. Okay, and because it's electronic and the bike is always watching what's going on with the suspension, we're gonna do all of the adjustments with the key on so that the bike knows what's going on. So the first thing I'm gonna do is, we don't know where we're at, so we're gonna back off everything so that we know where zero is.
What socket are you using?
This is a 13 millimeter. Okay, and what I did was I took all of the preload off of the forks. So right now we're starting at 0 preload on the forks. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna base this for an average customer, 180 to 200 pounds. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put 7 turns of preload on the forks, which is where we're gonna start. So I'm gonna do a half, 1, a half, 2, a half, 3, half, 4, half, 5, half, 6, half, 7. Okay, so we're gonna start off right there at 7 turns of preload. This is gonna be a learning experience, whoever the rider is. We're gonna make some other adjustments, and we'll get to all of those as we go, as we're out riding at a track day, a race weekend, whatever we're doing. We're gonna do this.
Preload does affect on compared to fixing it on the settings through the module right there.
Okay, so what the spring preload does is it puts tension on the spring. It makes the spring stiffer, basically, and it makes the suspension ride a little higher, and it makes it where it's able to support more weight, more of a load, so that when you get on the brakes, it's already got more support, so that when you get on the brakes, it doesn't make the suspension just automatically want to collapse and go to the bottom of the stroke. So as you get on the brakes and you apply more force to the front end, it doesn't just dive to the bottom, or when you go into a turn, it doesn't just compress all the way to the bottom. So, and we'll talk about how to measure that here in a minute. Once we get the shock set, then we'll talk about how to measure that. So now we still have the bike powered up. Now we're gonna do the same thing on the shock back here. Same 13 millimeter. We're gonna go right here to the preload adjuster, and we're just gonna back it all the way off. Okay, we're at 0. It won't back out anymore, so we're at 0 preload. And we're gonna go to 8 on the shock. The springs are a little bit soft on here, so we're gonna add just a touch more on the shock. So same thing, a half, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, now that we've got everything set, we can go ahead and turn the key off. Everything's good there. Now typically at this point, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a zip tie and I'm gonna put on one of the fork legs, cut the tail off of it, and I'm gonna put it fairly snug on the fork leg, and we're gonna leave it up near the bottom of the fork tube, just below the fork seal, and then send the rider out. Have the rider do a normal session. When they come back in, we're gonna take a look at the fork leg that we put that zip tie on and see where the zip tie ended up at the end of that session. If it's all the way buried at the bottom of the fork leg, then we know we're still a little bit too soft. And then we're gonna add a little bit more preload, maybe a touch more compression after we talk to the rider. Pull the zip tie back up, have them go out and ride the next session. If we talk to them and they give us some feedback, we'll make the appropriate adjustments. And we're just gonna keep going until we get to a happy medium. On these, we typically wanna see about a half to maybe 3/4 of an inch off the bottom before we get to the sweet spot. On the shock, on these, there's no real, other than rider input, rider feel, there's really no way to gauge it other than with the feedback that the rider gives us on that. So, the rider's gotta be kind of in tune with what's going on and be able to give you good feedback to be able to kind of help them get it set up. But I've got enough time on these that if I can get on the same page with the rider, we can get them a pretty good setup to get them going where they're pretty happy and pretty comfortable. I've had guys that have been really frustrated at the beginning of a day on one, and I spend a session or two kind of helping them get it going. And by the end of the day, they're completely in love with their bike and have a whole new outlook on what the bike's doing for them.